In Age of Sigmar, 40% of the points you can score in competitive play are tied to battle tactics. Knowing this, a comprehensive understanding of these battle tactics is essential to winning games in 4th edition. Welcome back to 10-Point Turns. Today we are going to cover all of the battle tactics in the current General's Handbook, how to achieve these tactics, and also how to deny your opponent from achieving these battle tactics. Make sure to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what you would like to see next. To start, how do you do battle tactics? Well, at the start of your turn, you can choose to use the Tactical Gambit ability, which allows you to select one battle tactic that you can complete by the end of the turn. If you complete that tactic, you are awarded 4 victory points. Once a tactic is used, the player who selected it cannot select it again in the future, so if you fail, you don't get to try again. An important note, if you don't think you can do any tactic at all, you do not have to use the Tactical Gambit ability, which lets you avoid burning a tactic. Now, battle tactics are important to your game plan, and there are 6 universal ones that you can attempt to complete. Along with these 6 universal tactics, each Grand Alliance also gives you access to 2 more options. This gives you a total of 8 battle tactics that you can attempt to complete in a game. Let's do a lightning round review of each one, covering important wording necessary to understand how to complete them. Do Not Waver requires you to fight with 2 or more units, and not have any friendly units be destroyed in that turn. When you select this tactic, you have to be wary of your opponent's ability to interfere with your units, avoiding magical interventions or countercharges that could lead to a unit's destruction. Also, be careful of your charge distances. If you select this tactic without any units in combat, save a CP to ensure your charge, and do not shoot the target unit and make the charge more difficult. Take Their Land is the first non-interactive tactic on the list. All you have to do is control a terrain piece wholly outside of your territory that is partially or totally in your opponent's territory. Simple enough, but we will revisit this tactic. Slay the Entourage is simple enough. Pick a unit in your opponent's general's regiment and destroy it. It can be destroyed in any manner, in any phase, so if you have solid hero phase or shooting phase damage, that can be a good option so it doesn't restrict your game plan too much. Seize the Center, the second of the non-interactive tactics, needs 2 of your units within 3 inches of the center of the board and not in combat. This is important to consider your opponent's counterplay, as they can countercharge you or magically intervene to teleport a unit to the middle of the field. Be cautious of these options, especially if this is your first turn tactic. Attack on 2 fronts is simpler than it looks at first. You need to take control of 2 objectives in a turn, and at least one had to be held by your opponent previously. This tactic requires you to set up carefully to be able to take 2 objectives at once, but can be a major swing in board presence and scoring if you can pull it off. Just make sure to count your control score carefully. Take the Flanks is the last of the universal tactics, and requires you to have a friendly unit within 6 inches of each short edge of the battlefield, and outside of friendly territory. Importantly, you do not have to be wholly outside of your territory. As long as the unit is partially out, it will count for this tactic. Also, units set up in the same turn do not count for the tactic, so no teleporting or deep striking. This is also the third non-interactive tactic. Jumping now to the Grand Alliance tactics, Order has Reclaim the Realms and Slay the Tyrants. Reclaim requires you to have a unit in each large battlefield quarter, and all of them have to be more than 6 inches from all enemy units. This is the 4th non-interactive tactic. Slay the Tyrant requires you to slay an enemy hero with a combat attack from a friendly unit. Grand Alliance Chaos gives you access to Offering of Carnage and Ordained Charge. Offering of Carnage is pretty simple, as it only requires 2 enemy units to be destroyed this turn. Ordained Charge requires some more setup. You need to choose an objective your opponent controls, have 2 units charge, at least one of those units on the chosen objective, and you need to control the objective. Definitely more complex than the former. With all tactics that are tied to charge moves, make sure to save a CP to reroll your charge if the dice do not cooperate. Running an army from Grand Alliance Death gives you access to Marked for the Grave and Inevitable Demise. Marked for the Grave requires you to destroy a non-hero unit with no models missing, but if there are only heroes on the battlefield, you can choose to destroy any chosen unit. Inevitable Demise needs at least 2 friendly units wholly in your opponent's territory and 9 inches away from all enemy units, without any of those units being set up this turn. Be careful with this tactic, as opponents can redeploy or countercharge to try and get within 9 inches of your units. This is also the 5th non-interactive tactic on the list. Bringing up the last of the Grand Alliances is Destruction, offering time to get stuck in and the Cunning approach. The former wants you to select 3 units wholly within your territory at the start of the turn, and by the end of the turn, all 3 need to be wholly outside your territory and have used a fight ability this turn. This one takes a ton of setup, and a lot can go wrong with one missed charge roll. The Cunning approach requires you to have a unit in combat with an enemy unit, and a friendly unit that is not in combat. The tactic is complete if your unit that was not in combat was in combat with the chosen enemy unit, and the chosen enemy unit was destroyed this turn. Now that we have quickly covered all of the tactics, which ones should you be focused on trying to complete every game? Which ones should you avoid? What are non-interactive tactics? The last question is definitely the easiest, and needs to be understood before you can evaluate which tactics are best. Non-interactive tactics are tactics that you can complete without needing the opponent to have anything on the board at all. They could be complete with just the friendly units called for in the tactic itself. Having more of these tactics is usually better, as it will allow you to score without relying on dice rolls in the form of charging or combat. In my recent How to Deploy video, I covered the concept of the first turn tactic. During the list construction step, you should have a reliable option for a turn 1 tactic if you choose or are given the first turn. Most armies will choose between seize the center and take the flanks, depending on if they want to control the center of the board with large anvils and centerpieces, or if they have access to fast units that can reliably move out of their territory towards the short edges of the battlefield on turn 1. However, if your army can reliably alpha strike on turn 1, you may be more inclined to choose a tactic like Do Not Waver or Slay the Entourage. Again, the idea of a first turn tactic is created in the list building phase, so you aren't hung out to dry when the first turn rolls around. The questions every player should be asking themselves about the battle tactic for the turn are: what tactics do I have available for this turn? What tactics do I want to save for a future turn? What tactics could I complete with little to no dice rolling? And are there any tactics that I can do that don't put me in a bad position on the board? These 4 questions really help guide you to the best option for the turn. Now, most of these questions are pretty self-explanatory, but why would you be saving tactics for a future turn? Well, 4th edition Age of Sigmar is incredibly lethal, and you can quickly table your opponent or nearly get tabled by your opponent by the 2nd turn. Therefore, by the start of your 3rd turn, there may not be enough models in your or your opponent's armies to score certain tactics. That's why some tactics are better saved for the future. At the start of the game, I could go for a take their land, but then I would no longer have that as an option in the later game, and I may leave myself with choices that I cannot score in those rounds. Warhammer, at its core, is a dice game. About half of the available tactics you can choose from require you to charge or destroy a unit. Now yes, a reinforced unit of Vanguard should be able to destroy a 5 health foot hero from whatever army, but the dice can always produce 20-something ones to the dismay of the player. There will always be a chance that you fail a 3-inch charge with a reroll because the dice woke up on the wrong side of the bed. But you should always be selecting a tactic that you are pretty sure you can accomplish, or at least one where the odds are in your favor. Think about it this way. The more things that need to go your way for the tactic to work, are the more reasons why you should look to select another tactic. If you need to hit a 9-inch charge with a reroll, and then need to completely destroy the unit you charged, all while capturing the objective, and then also need to do the same thing on the other side of the board, you probably will fail somewhere along the way. Now, what if the game has gone in your favor late in the 3rd battle round? Going into the 4th round, you are down by 18 points, but your opponent has no objectives and no units left. Surely you will be able to max score twice and take glorious victory for yourself and your army. As you scan your lists of battle tactics, you realize that you only left yourself 1 that you can score without your opponent. After the dust settles, you end up losing by 2, only being able to piece together 10 points in the 4th round and 6 in the 5th, all because you did not leave yourself with 2 non-interactive tactics. Non-interactive tactics are essential in cleaning up late-game scenarios if you are behind on the primary throughout the game, or if you are trying to hold on to a lead while your opponent is winning on board. You have 3 guaranteed, with Seize the Center, Take the Flanks, and Take Their Land in the core 6, and then you may have access to a 4th if you are Grand Alliance Order or Death. Like I mentioned before, you should be building towards your turn 1 tactic, which will then leave you the other 2 options late in the game. Take their land should almost never be your turn 1, since it is too versatile late game and too difficult in most circumstances early. Now, I briefly mentioned in the description of each tactic what to look out for and how that tactic can get countered. In general, for all tactics, you need to be on the lookout for opponent intervention whenever possible. 4th edition gives your opponent access to abilities in every phase of your turn, and most can interrupt tactics and shut down your 4-point play. I'm going to break this down by phase instead of by tactic, so you know what to look out for. In your hero phase, your opponent can use magical intervention, which gives them access to whatever their prayer or spell lore may have. The biggest thing to watch out for is if in their lore they have any teleports. You also need to be careful of some specific faction abilities, like Skaven's 3 claw steps ahead, where they can make a normal move in your hero phase, or some armies that can recur units for a CP in their hero phase. Also be careful of any abilities that can destroy or impede your unit's ability to move, like Luminous Overwhelming Heat. In your movement phase, be watchful for more recursion abilities and the redeploy command. Both can move units into your threshold to deny your tactics, like Reclaim the Realms or Inevitable Demise. In the shooting phase, be wary of units that can output heavy damage with the command Covering Fire. This can cripple or destroy your units that may be scoring tactics. In the charge phase, be wary of countercharges. They are highly variable, but can absolutely ruin your tactic if your opponent succeeds on the charge. If you need to get close to your opponent for a battle tactic, be mindful of the distance you leave between your units and your opponents that you are not charging. Combat is where everything can go sideways, from failing to destroy units or forgetting about abilities your opponents may have that can alter the dice in some unforeseen way. Be intentional with your combat selections, and almost always select the units to fight that will complete your battle tactic first. Never gamble on a unit surviving a combat, especially if that combat is required for a tactic like Do Not Waver. Lastly, in the end phase, make sure you check your opponent's rules and abilities to make sure you won't take any random lethal damage or have models show up somewhere on the board that could ruin your tactic. You know what the tactics do, you know what to watch out for when you complete them, and now you need to know how to deny your opponents these exact same tactics. Denying tactics can be much simpler than you think, but you have to do it in advance. It is much harder to deny your opponent's tactic without having your army set up in a way to do it from the beginning. How can you threaten a countercharge if you don't have any other units within 12 inches of the one your opponent selected to destroy? A simple consideration to consistently make your opponent's life harder is keeping your general's regiment as small as possible. If all you have in your regiment is a large centerpiece model and their dedicated bodyguard unit, your opponent will have a hard time if they ever select Slay the Entourage. If you don't run in many weak foot heroes, order armies will have a difficult time selecting Slay the Tyrants against you. You can actually build your list to make your opponent's tactics harder. When it comes to in-game, you want to emphasize denying tactics that already have a chance of failing. If you can intervene and teleport a massive block of infantry into the middle of the field to deny Seize the Center, that's great. But it may be easier to deny an opponent's Do Not Waver than it is to stop their Take the Flanks. You want to dump as many speed bumps in front of them as you can, while not diverging from your own personal game plan. In general, when it comes to scoring or denying battle tactics, you need to be planning ahead. In your movement phase on your first turn, you should be thinking about what tactic you will choose on turn 2. Even if you don't have a definite answer, beginning to think about that process will help you further as a player, and make you harder to stop when it comes to scoring points. Battle tactics are a core part of the system, and can win and lose you games based on your ability to complete them. Let me know in the comments how your games have been going, and if battle tactics have been an integral part of your wins and losses. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see next.